Apparently, Justin Trudeau has announced that he will repeal the emergency powers used to freeze $8 million from 210 bank accounts that were connected to the Freedom Convoy, the trucker protests going on there. He said, "We're ready to confirm that the situation is no longer an emergency." And he added that we're confident that existing laws and bylaws are now sufficient to keep people safe. I have a lot to say about his way of phrasing things here. One thing I will say is that people have started to learn how to keep their money safe there, which is a good start. You know, crypto has played an important role in getting money to people who need it, and not having their accounts seized because one person decides that, you know, he doesn't like people pushing back against government actions. So, you know, very, very interesting to see all of this unfolding there, and really quite devastating, actually. I've been chatting to a lot of Canadians who are actually there in the midst of all the protests, and just hearing the disconnect between the way corporate media has been reporting what's going on there and what they've actually been seeing on the ground is a very scary situation, seeing that disconnect. But Zach, I'm going to throw it to you for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really big story for crypto, even after, you know, weeks and months after this sort of winds down. This is still going to be a really big story. This was like the story that got big time figureheads in the crypto industry talking about the importance of custodying your assets. You saw Jesse Powell of Kraken, you saw Brian Armstrong of Coinbase, you saw those tweets being reported to the Canadian authorities. This is that thing that I think a lot of people started talking about, right? What does it mean to be in control of your finances in an internet-connected age, in an age in which digital surveillance can be a fact of life, even in Western democracies? And I think this is going to be potentially, not going to make any predictions, but potentially kind of catalytic for opening people's minds to what digital currencies, what cryptocurrencies specifically can represent. And I think if we look back, you know, 6 months from now to this point in time, it's going to be really interesting to see what has emerged out of some of these conversations that have come up. I saw Jen's hand, but I really want Naomi's thoughts on that. And then I think we should bump down Jen. So Naomi, take it away.
Jen, you go first. Your hand was up.
Okay, I'll go super quick. So I totally agree with both of you. I think this is a really pivotal moment when it comes to education about the real benefits of crypto. And I wanted to point to a quote that was in the story you shared, Naomi. The United States Senator Rand Paul said he's been concerned about acts like the Emergency Act for a while. And his quote was, "We have the same sort of statutes here, and I have long been the opponent of these. We actually in the United States have an emergency act that allows the president to shut down the internet." And so I think this story and just the reporting and the socializing of what is actually entailed in these documents that we don't pay attention to. The Emergency Act was created in 1988 in Canada, and it was only put into action now in 2022, is really going to encourage people to open their eyes and look into the powers that governments have and what that actually means when it comes to our freedoms. But Naomi, up to you.
Yeah, I just want to jump on something that Zach said earlier when he's talking about Canada really kind of being this illuminating moment for a lot of people. And there are so many detractors to crypto who have not been on board, who didn't see the point, who are like, I'm just going to use my Visa card. And suddenly now they're speaking out and saying, I see the benefit of it. Yeah, sure. I mean, the stuff was going on in all of these countries all around the world, but when it hits close to home, it's easier for people to recognize the threat. And that's what we're seeing now is people are seeing it close to home. They're saying, okay, this could happen for any group that dissents against the government. And, you know, the government isn't always going to have your best interests at heart. Some people would argue that they never do. But it is important that all of these people are now seeing the benefits of all of this. And I think that, like, all of this I can't handle the rhetoric from Trudeau right now, where he's talking about keeping the people safe and protecting people, especially after interviewing so many people on the ground there who are actually involved with this, whether they actually live in Ottawa or whether they're people who are passing through part of the protest. I'm hearing all the same story from them and a completely different story from the government, where he's saying this is about keeping people safe and, you know, being there to support Canadians and all of this. I think that this was clearly a show of power to intimidate people who may dissent against what the government decides. And it's a completely authoritarian response. And it should be slammed by anyone who believes in actual democracy and not someone coming in and disallowing people the right to protest about what their own government is doing. I think it's terrible that these intimidation tactics have worked and have, dissipated these protests. And my heart goes out to all the people who are hurt through this entire process. So many people that I've spoken to have been hurt by the brutality going on there, the authoritarian crackdown on bank accounts where they just can't access their funds in times of desperate need. So this whole situation makes me so angry. And now that he's just smoothing it over and saying, like, we've protected Canadians and we're ready to move on, makes me so angry, because people will forget about this so quickly in the news cycle. It's what happens every single time. But I hope that a little bit of that remains in people's memory, and they realize that there are tools for freedom out there. They could be learning how to use them. They can be protecting themselves in situations like this, where it doesn't matter if the government shuts down your bank account. You have alternatives now. But I will throw it maybe to Zach well, actually, I throw it to David, because I think we've heard from you on this one.
Well, yeah, I think that I would just piggyback a little bit on your last comment, that there will be, it will disappear from the news cycle, but the way that, I guess the meme of sovereign digital currency has spread is bit by bit. When these things happen, is always a small portion of people who get the message, who see the implications, who are maybe not watching mainstream media and getting that version of events, and who actually see the threat. So, this, I think Zach is right. This is going to be transformative on a long-term basis, though, because these lessons do take time to sink in. And I do want to especially note that I think that people who are calling out this as a real worrisome point, but have not been open to arguments on behalf of, say, people outside of North America, do need to spend some time reflecting on why this suddenly matters to them, and what exactly is different about it than other examples that are proliferating around the world. But that being said, I do think the message is getting home, and yeah, it's a word. But at the same time, this does reflect a broader trend, right? We have governments who are more willing to take these kinds of actions, and emergency acts definitely are all over the place. These things are in place in many different governments.